We are God.
Hey everyone, Mikey here, and welcome to another build video, where today I am going over a, a build that actually has two themes built into one. The first theme is related to Star Trek Online, and that is a science EPG control build using mainly free consoles that came from previous events or event ships. The second theme is based off of one of my favorite web series, Ruby, which is made by Rooster Teeth. So let's take a quick look at the build, shall we? So here's the build. I am using the Rysian Science Vessel, otherwise known as the Weather Control Vessel. That was from the summer event a couple of years ago. It's a pretty good science platform for EPG and control builds. Yes, there is way better out there, but considering that this was a free ship at the time, it is an excellent choice. Now, unfortunately for newer players, you do not have access to this ship, and that is very unfortunate. As I said, it makes for a pretty good platform for science builds, especially if you are unable to get your hands on better science ships such as the Vern or even the Lucari Boomerang, which comes from your fleet. Even though that is a fleet ship, it is a little bit on the pricey side. And as I said, the other theme is a bit of a Ruby theme. As you can see, the name of this ship is named after one of the characters. And I do have electric abilities, gravity, fire, and ice. So if you know what the show Ruby is about, you know what that is. So because this is a science ship, I went with a side torp build. And your standard science torpedoes, your gravimetric torpedo from your Dyson rep, a crafted particle emission plasma torp. Yes, these mods are not the right mods, but considering I've crafted like 8 of these over the years, I've just given up getting one with the correct mods. And the dark matter quantum torpedo from your Discovery rep. For the deflector, warp core, and shield, I am using the revolutionary set. Again, this was an event set. Another set that newer players or people who missed out on this definitely need an ability to get this, because this is a very, very good set on the budget end. It's also a very good set for leveling tunes. When I'm leveling a new tune, they always have this set until I can get reputation items. And I'm using the 3-piece because it has the weaponized mycelial emitter, and this thing can hit like a brick. I've had this crit for well over 1 million on multiple occasions. On the IC run that you're going to see in a little bit, unfortunately I didn't hit for as hard as I would have liked, but it still hit hard and still worth using. The 4-piece, in my opinion, is not really worth it because you're sacrificing the engines. When you're sacrificing not having the competitive engines, you end up being a lot slower, and speed equals DPS. So that's why I do slot the competitive engines anyways. For the mines, I am using the Nakura Rep mine launcher. This comes from your Nakura Rep, so very easy to get. The Tetrion mine, this is a mission item. And the Black Ops mines, which again was another older event prize. I believe this is currently available in MUDs for those who missed it. These mines are actually really good for science builds, and overall they're a pretty good mine anyways. Devices, pretty much standard. Exotical Particle Flood for the extra damage, Deuterium Surplus for speed, and Reactive Armor for heal. Now consoles is where we get a little bit interesting, and there's a couple here that I would normally not use, but because I wanted to put as many of the free consoles on as possible, and to showcase that some of them are definitely worth it and some of them kind of aren't, I have 7 event consoles on here, so let's take a look at them. The first one is the Enhanced Soliton Wave Generator. This came from the Ryzen Luxury Cruiser, which was last year's summer event ship. It's not a great console, but it's not a bad console. It pretty much acts as a pull. Not much damage, unfortunately, but a little bit of extra crit severity for exotic damage is nothing to scoff at. We also have the latest console from the latest event, and that is the Nanoprobe Assimilator. Passive control is always good for science builds. Against non-Borg targets, this is a fun console because it can assimilate a lot of targets as opposed to just one with the retrofit assimilator. The damage is not as good as I was expecting, but it is a fun console and it does have purposes, and again, with a passive of 25 control, it is worth having. Now we have probably the best science console we have ever gotten as an event console, and that's the Tholian Web Spinner Array. This desperately needs to be made available to people who missed it. It is an excellent console. Again, you have a passive of a good amount of control. It also gives Tetrion damage, which for those of you who are into Tetrion builds, this is a good console to have because not too many consoles boost that. And also against held targets, you gain a 50% Cat 2 damage, which is substantial. And that's why you'll see a lot of builds will pair this console with the blackout mines, because these do count as a hold, as do the Nakura mines. But also the Clicky does substantial damage, and it is an excellent console, and again, probably the best free science console we have ever gotten. Next one is Open the Maw of Graythor. This came from one of the Fikari ships, or one of the winter ships from a while back. It doesn't do anything spectacularly. Augie did point out in one of his latest videos that this is a troll console, and it is, because you can't activate it too early. But when used right, it's actually kind of cool looking to shoot a big fireball in front of you. And because it's one of the very few consoles that give us a fire effect, that's why I'm using it. Next we have the Exotic Particle Field Exciter. This is the crafted console, one of the hardest to actually craft, and probably the second most expensive item on this build. These run for hundreds of millions on the exchange, unfortunately. But it has the single highest boost to the exotic particle, so definitely worth it. Now, one of the more controversial consoles in the game, and that's the Cutting Tractor Beam. The Clicky is okay, does okay damage, but when you see on the tooltip it says disable engines or shields, about 99% of the time it's going to disable the engines and not the shields. So there is something wrong with the coding for this console, but the main reason to use it is the passive, where every time you activate a universal console you get extra damage from them, so that's why it's used. And especially on science builds, most of your damage is going to come from your consoles anyways, so it ends up helping that. Next is the Temple Vortex Probe, another older event. I don't remember off the top of my head what event this came from, because this is an older console. The Clicky does absolute garbage, DPS wise, but it gives a little bit of boost exotic damage, gives a good amount of turn, which is always helpful, and it doesn't benefit this particular ship, but other science ships that have temple abilities, it is a good thing to have. Next console is the console that comes off of this ship, which is the Neutronic Eddy Generator. And this is a fantastic science console. It is pretty much meta on a lot of science builds. It does considerable damage at times, gives an extra little bit of drain expertise and extra aux power, which is always good. And another reason I use it, especially on some of my builds, is the two-piece with the Enhanced Soliton Wave. You get even more EPG and more control. Then we have Akira's Vengeance. This was another event console. It does okay. When this console first came out, I was really hyped for it, but my expectations were too high, I'll admit it. But it does okay damage. The passives are, nah. but it does okay damage, and it can actually hit fairly hard as well. Now I have the one premium item on this ship, and yes, I know I'm going to get some flack for it, but when you're doing a science control builds, this console is pretty much a must. Yes, it comes from a Lobby ship, but the Maquis Raider is also in a Muds pack, so it is kind of more or less available to majority of players. And in all honesty, Lobby ships don't go for that much on the exchange. And if you are going to get into doing mid to high end science builds, this is definitely the one console you definitely need to have. And, you know, the passives are excellent, extra EPG, extra control, but the clicky is amazing. Damage wise, it doesn't do a lot of damage, but it is another control ability, and it's a must on science builds. And of course, we have Lorca's custom fire controls, because this is on almost every build. Extra crit and the shield pen. And of course, for the 2-piece war discretion. Now looking at the traits, personal traits, we have Fragment of AI Tech for the extra control, Intelligence Agents for the reduction in cabin abilities, Invasive Control Programming, because it has a chance to knock subsystems offline when using control abilities, and this has a lot. Kinetic Precision, because this is torpedoes, extra shield pen, always needed. Psychological Warfare to help with the control abilities. Resonating Payload for the physical and kinetic resistance debuffs, which suits the build because it's EPG builds and torpedo builds are both physical and kinetic, so it helps increase damage. Of course, one of the most important traits in the game, especially for science builds, unconventional systems. Every control ability reduces recharge time at universal consoles. The other must-have science personal trait is Particle Manipulator. You obtain this upon reaching level 15 in your science R&D. Then we have the Boimler effect for the cooldowns. Yes, this is another expensive item, but considering that this has taken over as the meta for cooldowns, but the good part is you don't need Lobby to buy this. You can grind the EC and buy it on the exchange. Yes, it's not cheap, but it is definitely worth it. And Subnucleonic Transfer, because this is a science captain and the science builds, basically it makes the subnuke even better. Starship traits. The first two are from the two Rising ships, so event ships. So that is Leisurely Pace, which is from the Ryzen cruiser. So basically, when you're at 25% throttle or less, for every 5 seconds, you gain extra EPG and control, and that stacks 4 times. And it also slows down enemies and reduces their damage output. So it's a very good, very, very good budget trait. I actually do use this on my high-end builds as well, because I find it actually suits and works. Second is the trait off of this particular ship, and that is Electrified Anomalies. The damage from this is hit or miss if it's good. Some people will say it's a garbage trait. Some people say it's a good trait. To me, it is a mid-tier trait. You won't see this on high-end builds, but mid-tier, it is worth it. And again, it was a free trait. So now we have 3 C-Store traits. So keeping in line with with a semi-budget, and that is improved gravity well from the Andorian or Day 1 science pilot escorts. Basically increases the gravity well, decreases the cooldown, and the primary target gets a damage debuff. Or damage resistance debuff, sorry. Next is Spore-Infused Anomalies from either the Somerville or the KDF variant, the Magic School Bus. Anytime you activate science abilities, it shoots out spores and deals electrical damage. And then from the Tier 6 Equinox, Synthetic Good Fortune. Basically, even more control and crit chance that anytime you activate control abilities, and there's several on here. So this is your control on these builds can get to ridiculously high levels, as can your crit chance. For stations, again, I've gone very heavy on control abilities, not just for the Yukon procs, but also to proc synthetic good fortune, and spore infused anomalies, and a bunch of other things. So I have 7 Yukon procs, which is actually better than expected. So jam targeting, tractor beam repulsors, photonic shockwave, all Yukon procs, and then Chemocyte lace weaponry because it's a debuff and more radiation damage. Torpedo spread 2 because this is a torpedo build. Emergency power to Ox for the extra damage, and also to proc a duty officer. Unstable warp bubble because this is a control ability, so another Yukon proc. Very cold in space. It is classified as a hazard, so you can get spore infused off of this. Hazard emitters just as a heal and a cleanse. Photonic officer to help with the cooldowns when Boimler doesn't proc. Gravity well because it's the star of the show and it's controlled and you need gravity well. And then tractor beam and scramble sensors, again, Yukon procs. So duty officers, I've gone, again, a little different. Usually not ones you will see too often. A couple are a little bit expensive, but again, not using the Borg ones because I don't have many good ones on this tune, and I kind of don't want to use those on budget-friendly builds because we all know those Borg officers can get ridiculously expensive. So the first one I have is a weapon officer to reduce time to recharge using subsystem targeting attacks. I do have those on my spam bar because these are procs for the competitive engines, so that helps with little bursts of speed at times. And the technician to boost extra damage when using exotic abilities after using power to Ox. Pretty much another must-have for science builds. Using the tractor beam officer that I normally run on my support builds, that basically turns repulsors in from a push into a pull. And then of course your gravity well engines offline, your gravity well aftershock, pretty much standard on control builds. And then PDAD, who I've shown before, to basically keep the recharge time of photonic shockwave and photonic officer down. Again, it's not something I would recommend slotting. There are better, but this is the best I had, so why not? So now we'll go to the ISE, and then we'll see you afterwards for the parse explanation. Hey everyone, and welcome to the parse explanation for the ISE run you just saw on my event-themed science build on the Rysian weather control ship. I was on my science tune Hannah, who has the vast majority of my science abilities, and this build did a reasonable 255k DPS. I will say I was a little disappointed. I was aiming for 300k, but considering the equipment I am using and the traits, and no temporal seeding and only 6 Yukon procs, 255 is very respectable. And also keep in mind that science builds and EPG heavy builds in general perform far better in Hive Elite over Infected Space Elite. But this was a fun build to put together, and it did very well. Again, another really good group of players who are very experienced. My very good friend JB was tanking. He did a very good job in his brand new tank. I won't be showing his tanking numbers because he is planning to do a video and I don't want to spoil it. But let's just say that build did very well. So look forward to seeing that video when JB releases it. Also, our very good friend Grumpy Old Nord, who hosted this ISE on his stream. Thank you very much, Grumpy. Always a pleasure having you around. And he did 249k. Then we had our friend Master Chief, did 423k. Very impressive. Good job. And MC Stu, otherwise known as Mixed Stud, who is the king of free-to-play builds on his YouTube channel, but he is secretly a DPSer as well, and he did 659 on his Torp build. So make sure you check out Mixed Stud's YouTube channel, check out Grumpy Old Nord on Twitch, and check out JB on YouTube, who will be streaming shortly, if not already after this video has come out. So looking at the abilities, because this is a science build, of course, pets are number 1 at 72, and that is primarily the Neutronic Eddy, the Badland Cyclone, which is from the plasma control console from the Maquis Raider, the Borg Generator 9k. You know, as we say, it does okay DPS, but we're using it for the passive because it boosts all the other universal consoles. The Maw of Grethor 2k, again, not impressive. And not surprisingly, Chain Web Projection is the number 1 ability, the number 1 console at 27k. As I've stated before and many others, this is probably the best EPG console we have gotten, and it's a huge bonus that it was a free console that came from an event. I'm just hoping that players who have missed out on that have a chance to get that, because this is one that it's a no doubt about it's pick it up if and when available. The Gravimetric Rift, this is from the Gravimetric Torpedoes, 11k, not too bad. Gravity Well, 9.5k. Spore Infused, 9k. Again, all pretty much standard. Theta Radiation from the Plasma Crafted Torpedo, 8k. Spore Infused from the Gravity Well, just under 8k. I did goof on, I didn't get a good clean shot off with the Weaponized Mycelial Emitter. It only hit for 800k. I have had this thing hit for just under 3 million in the past, so this is quite a low hit for me. But hey, it's decent that, you know, one activation you get almost 7k DPS out of. Looking next, Akira's Revenge, which is one of the other event consoles, did just over 5k, so it's not terrible. Max hit at 320,000, almost 321, so that's actually pretty impressive. What else? The Soliton wave generator, yeah, it's not really meant for damage. It's there for the 2-piece and for the ability that it helps bring enemies closer in. So yeah, 1700, yeah. Open Maw, not even 1500, so yeah. But again, they're free consoles from events or event ships, so it's always worth looking at them to slot in as substitutions for some of the more expensive higher end consoles. So yeah, everything else is pretty much standard. It's nothing. Oh yeah, there, and then yeah, Temple Vortex, which is complete garbage, but the passives are what actually make it worth and why you would want to use it. But all in all, 255k for a ship that has primarily event items and only one premium item, I would say is pretty good. So there we have it. Just under 260k. As I said during this parse explanation, not the best outcome, but definitely not the worst. The whole point of this video was to showcase the importance of doing events. You never know when a free item can become useful or even meta. We have seen it time and time again with items that when they are first announced, people look at them and go, it's not worth it. Just to be 6 months down the road or a year down the road, it's like, wait a second, no, this is actually good, it's meta. Perfect example on this build is the Neutronic Eddies and the Chain Web Projector. Those are two items that, especially in the science community, are definitely meta. So my advice to you out there, do every single event when you can. The free stuff is free stuff. Never complain about getting anything for free. And just further proof that sometimes these free items do end up being exceptionally good. So I hope everyone has enjoyed this video. So please do the normal YouTube things, comment, like, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. I know you hate hearing it just as much as I hate saying it, but it's the truth. Also, don't forget to follow me on Twitch. And I hope everyone has a fantastic day. My name is Mikey, and until the next video, bye-bye for now.
We are God.